Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Yelling Will Ensue, the podcast that doesn't pay its talent. I'm your host, Aaron, and with me, as always, is Jesus
Hello.
and Jacob.
Hi.
And we are very blessed to be joined by a special guest today. We have Wilton from our esports episode.
Hello, guys.
And today we are talking about video games, and specifically we are bringing up that old subject, the console war. Does everybody remember the console war?
Oh, Lord.
The thing that's already over because Sony destroyed Microsoft.
Remember just like it was yesterday.
So, well, I think it's still going on. I don't know if Sony has officially defeated Microsoft yet. But you know what? We're going to talk about it. So, recently, the video game Killer Instinct, if people remember that, released a trailer of the Arbiter from Halo. And he will be a playable character for this latest season of Killer Instinct. So, Killer Instinct is on its third season. And
Yes.
The third season started with a guest character, Rash, from Battletoads, which is an old Rare game, and if you remember, Rare did the old games like Battletoads, obviously KI, and a few Nintendo games actually, because they used to come out on Nintendo consoles. But Microsoft bought them a few years back, or started a partnership with them, and now a lot of their properties belong under Microsoft. They had the Rare Replay and things of that nature, and I believe the Arbiter's appearance in Killer Instinct is another chapter in the long, protracted console wars, because I remember when Street Fighter V was announced. Does everybody remember when Street Fighter V was announced?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was not in America at the time I woke up to that, and then I saw it was PlayStation exclusive, and I got really mad. But yeah, so Street Fighter V has been released. It is a PlayStation 4 exclusive for the consoles, at least. It is on the PC Master Race for all others.
Lovely.
Exactly. But the interesting thing is when Street Fighter V was announced to be a PlayStation exclusive consoles wise, Microsoft executive Phil Spencer announced that he was okay with it being exclusive because he would rather focus on Microsoft's properties than have to spend all that extra money on a third party. And for someone like Capcom and Sony to come together to even make Street Fighter V in its form possible was, a labor of love. It was a big deal because Sony wanted to kind of corner the market on the fighting game. They wanted you to think fighting game community and PlayStation in the same sentence. So how does everybody feel about this latest, chapter of the console wars? Let's start with Jesus.
This is a big development in the console wars because the fighting game community is so large right now. Fighting games are probably just below RTSs and MOBAs right now in popularity. So it's really, really big that Sony would actually partner up with Capcom to make Street Fighter V happen. Street Fighter is arguably the biggest one of the fighting game community right now. So them doing that sets Sony up pretty well. I mean, Microsoft right now, the only real exclusive fighting game they have is Killer Instinct, it's popular, but it is nowhere near as popular as something like Street Fighter.
Yeah, definitely. And I know, Jacob, you are a Microsoft fan. Is that correct?
I play both, but I do favor Microsoft a little more.
So how do you feel about something like, fighting games being more associated with Sony as opposed to with Microsoft?
Well, ideally, I'm not really a big fighting game fan, so I don't know a lot about it, but I know a little bit. Like, I know Street Fighter is one of the legendary franchises for a reason. and I played Street Fighter when I was growing up, and I thought it would surprise me when I found out that it was exclusive. So ideally, when I saw that, I say Sony is planning to try to take the fighting market, the community, to the PlayStation. Because ideally, Microsoft is happy with what they have idea with the first-person shooters. So they're dominating that market. They think that will be able to cover for losing the fighting. But at the same time, they realize they kind of go without it. That way, they're doing the whole Killer Instinct thing, which is I enjoyed it from when I got to play it from time to time, but it can't compare to Street Fighter because it's Street Fighter. So ideally, they give Sony a huge upper hand when it comes to the fighting game genres, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely so. I mean, like, it used to be a lot of the Street Fighter and Marvel were played on Xbox 360 when, Street Fighter 4 was still the main game, and Marvel vs. Capcom 3 was, well, I mean, it is still popular, but, they both used to be on Xbox 360. But then once PlayStation 4 kind of took off, Ultra Street Fighter 4 became a game that mostly dominated PlayStation 4 in tournaments. And Wilton, we're both huge fighting game fans, and we've we've had long discussions on this sort of stuff. But you're a PC guy, so this doesn't really affect you as much, right?
Yeah, definitely. But it's interesting though still because I recently bought a console in order to engage in some of the fighting games, right? And the access that I was trying to get was for the anime fighters, which I really felt that Sony already had a pretty good grasp on. So now that's interesting to see them going for the big dog, Street Fighter, when it could be argued that the large market of fighting games is already owned by Sony.
Yeah, I mean, like, you talk about the anime fighters, so like Guilty Gear and Blaze Blue, or BlazBlue, or however you want to pronounce it, they're both on PlayStation consoles. And
yeah, and a lot of the smaller anime fighters as well, that you don't hear too much about, are on PS3. But now with Street Fighter taking over onto Sony's console, it's a huge deal because now it feels like with people having to get PlayStations, there might be more access to the other fighting games that are on Sony because they already have the system.
Yeah, I mean, it's also interesting because something like King of Fighters, I know it's not as popular as it used to be, but that's also going to be on PlayStation 4 exclusively.
Right.
Which is, kind of a big deal because, most of the games minus Killer Instinct are available on either PC or exclusively on PS4, and that's a huge deal because, when you go to these big tournaments, all you're going to see is PlayStation, and you're not really going to see as many Microsoft representatives because of Killer Instinct is getting bigger, but it isn't to the point where it can necessarily contend with Street Fighter, but Mortal Kombat's on both. It's, I don't know, I think it's more on PlayStation though for tournaments. So, the Arbiter is now in Killer Instinct, which I think is a smart move because it gets people from, first-person shooters interested in Killer Instinct. Because I was a big first-person shooter guy back in the day, but I got more into fighting games, so if I was really big into Halo, I can imagine really having interest in Killer Instinct because a Halo character's in there. So Jacob, you love Halo. We know this. So
Do you really know that?
we should know this. I know this. We should know this. But I mean, I know you love Halo and you already have Killer Instinct. But let's say if you didn't have Killer Instinct, would the addition of the Arbiter be enough to say, you know what? I'll try out Killer Instinct.
As a fan, I would probably look into it. Honestly, I would probably try it. I know they have a demo of it for the trial version of Killer Instinct. So I will play the trial version, and if I like it, if I like how it is, of course I'm not buy it to add a fighting game, another fighting game to my collection, and plus I get to play at the orbital in it. So I see it as a good strategy, but at the same time, it one of the one you have to be iffy with. If you buy Killer Instinct, if I'm correct, it's $20 right now, and then you have to buy the season pass that come with the orbital in it, which I think is $10 or $20. So basically, you'd be spending $30 to $40 if you just want to play it at the orbital.
Okay, so the way the game works is it's kind of not like a traditional release schedule. So it goes by seasons. So you can own like specific seasons but not have access to the other season characters. Like you can't fight as those characters. So like Jesus has been streaming occasionally and he has season 1, right?
Yeah, I have season 1.
But you can fight the season 2 characters, you just can't play as them, right?
Yeah, if someone wants to fight you, or even if you're just fighting against the computer, you can choose to fight against the season 2 players or characters. You just can't pick them yourself.
So I imagine with season 3 you could do something very similar. So you could just buy season 3, so you get access to the Arbiter and Rash and a few of the KI vets coming back, but you wouldn't be able to play as the big famous KI people who've already been in the other seasons, so like Riptor or Jago or Orchid or all those people.
Exactly.
But I think this is it has long lasting, or not even lasting, long reaching things, because with Microsoft putting rare characters and Halo characters in Killer Instinct, it kind of opens the door for people to be like, hey, you know what, if Rash is in Killer Instinct, maybe they could make another Battletoads, or if you put, I think Conkers is a pretty big rare staple that people like, Conker's Bad Fur Day. If he was in Killer Instinct, that might help gauge interest to have a future Conkers game. So how do you guys feel about putting guest characters in there to kind of vet interest for future installments in that franchise? So we'll start with Jesus.
All right, I think it's a great way to do it, because fighting games in general are pretty popular right now. There's quite a few different ones, and so they're extremely popular. It's a good way to see how people who normally probably wouldn't play some of those games or haven't played those games in years, to see if they're still interested in these characters. Like you said, Conquer hasn't had I believe the last game was on N64, so same. And then we had a Banjo-Kazooie game on 360. So I mean, this is a good way just to test out the market, just to see, well, are these people interested in these characters? And if enough people buy the packs with those characters, I'm sure that they will definitely consider maybe bringing their own standalone games back. So I think it's a good way to sort of gauge the community, to see what's going on.
All right, Jacob, how do you feel about the possibility of a future, rare game with rare characters in KI?
I see no problem with it. I think it actually be an interesting idea to do, to allow bring the nostalgia factor back. I love when I growing up. I still love it. I play if I could, I'd play it again. Same thing with Banjo-Kazooie. But if you bring them in and let people say, "Oh, I remember that game," then my hint to maybe we'll actually get another game for that series. And since we're on the topic of having guest characters, remember, even though Sony and Microsoft do this, remember the big company who actually do this a lot in Nintendo. With Super Smash Bros., they have a character from I think 6 different franchises they don't even own.
Yeah, so they have Ryu's in it, in the late Smash, Pac-Man, Mega Man,
Bayonetta.
Sonic, Bayonetta. But Bayonetta is on Nintendo console now, so it's a little different.
Yeah, but it's not owned by them, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I don't think they own Bayonetta, but they are basically working with the creators of Bayonetta now, because Bayonetta 2 was a Wii U exclusive.
No, okay.
But I mean, you definitely touch on something I want to talk about later. But But Wilton, how do you feel as I don't think you play that much KI, but how do you feel about them putting in guest characters, kind of gauge the market?
Honestly, I think it's pretty interesting because I used to play Battletoads when I was a little kid, so it was wonderful to see how they portrayed Rash in full 3D new graphics, right, in a fighting game too. And I think it is helpful in gauging interest for potentially a sequel to a long dead title, because now people see a modern rendition of the character, and some people who may have not have been introduced to this character before see this new character, and also it feels that wonderful dream battle kind of thing, right? What would happen if the Battletoads fought Jago, right?
Yeah, exactly. Definitely, I can understand that. And I think a lot of the way KI is being handled has to do directly with how Sony and Capcom are handling Street Fighter V, and maybe a little bit of there's kind of a reciprocal relationship in that sense, because I think the way Street Fighter V is being handled is a little bit like how KI was handled with Microsoft. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. But one of the biggest things is KI will have cross-play, cross-platform play, so people on consoles can play with people on PC. And that announcement, I don't know if it actually superseded or kind of came a little bit after, but it came roughly around the same time that Street Fighter V announced that it will also have crossplay between PlayStation 4 and PC. So how do you feel about Microsoft kind of, seeing how PlayStation wants to corner the market on the fighting game community, and they see they have this new thing that they want to test out, and they say, you know what? If that's where the future is, we're going to follow them too. So, Jesus, how do you feel about that?
It's a change of pace for Microsoft, because during the last gen of consoles with the PS3 and the Xbox 360s, one of the deciding factors for Square Enix to not put Final Fantasy XIV on the 360 was Microsoft not wanting to allow cross-platform play, because if you play Final Fantasy XIV on the PS3 or PS4, you still get to be in the PC community as well. So Sony's been experimenting with this technology for a while now, and Microsoft had said they didn't want to do it. So for them to see the lost customers and the lost amount of people with that game, and then now again with Street Fighter, they kind of had to flip the script to keep up with Sony in that sense.
All right, and Jacob, you're a Microsoft defender. Defend your company.
Well, about the cross-playing?
Yeah, about crossplay.
Well, the cross-play idea is a good one. Yeah, Microsoft didn't like the idea back in the Final Fantasy. At the same time, it was the whole I remember it was a big cherry issue they were worried about, but they realized that it wasn't going to do as much harm as they thought it would. And so they decided to give it a chance with KI, but since it is KI, it specifically owned by Microsoft, so they were doing all the hand-on work themselves with the company they own. So for playing it on the computer and on the Xbox One. So they're not having another company that Square Enix to do it. So probably one of the reasons why they're willing to do it now, they did lose customers due to that fact. But at the same time, it allowed them to rethink what they did. And so they're doing it now, but they're doing it themselves, that they actually know exactly what's going in and what's going out, basically for the networking. So it makes sense. They're doing it themselves now. They thought it would be a better idea to give it a chance. So I haven't played enough Killer Instinct to actually realize it. But doing the comparison is a great idea. And even though they did use Street Fighter, and Sony have been doing it for a few years, they lost a lot of major stuff because by doing that as well, they forget about the franchises they're working with.
Yeah, I mean, I remember a big point for E3 this year, or last year rather, was Microsoft was kind of pushing how Windows was going to work on a console and how games were going to work on Windows. You know, they were basically combining the two entities, right? And I
Yes.
think that really kind of plays into the whole cross-play thing. So it makes sense that they would want to focus on like you know, their first party things. But Wilton, as a guy who plays, you know, a lot of third party things because, you know, you own a PC, how do you feel about Microsoft only caring about first party over third party?
I mean, it really doesn't make a huge difference for me. They're caring about only their first party because I'm not really interested in most of the third party properties. Um, Speaking about the crossplay thing, it's definitely something that's very necessary because fighting games are one of the few genres I think where crossplay can happen without any imbalance or any difference of playstyle because you have all the basic controls, right? It's not like when you have crossplay with shooters, you have the controller versus mouse and keyboard, and people debate that all day, right? So we're not going to get into that.
Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah. I think this is an important move for Microsoft to try to compete with Sony because it is a huge selling point that I could play with my friends on PS4 with Street Fighter 5 with my PC. Yeah.
I mean, I think, you know, you touch on something very important because there is very little, like, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, the skill gap isn't added to with the controller or the keyboard issue because, like, something like, I know Rocket League has a big issue with that because people on the PC supposedly can play a lot better than people on the consoles, and people on the PC can tell if you're playing on the console, which kind of, I don't know. Do you know about that issue, Wilton?
Um, I don't know about the issue with crossplay on that particular title. I do know it is an extremely control-intense game. So if the PC, which you know you can use any peripheral you want, you can plug in whatever controller you want. So you might have a potential for better performance in that game versus a console, which might have more limited options.
Right. I can definitely see that. But I think we're gonna move on to our next big thing. We were talking about Bayonetta being in Smash 4, and you know, Bayonetta kind of got a similar deal that Capcom got with Street Fighter 5, in that the company was willing to help pay and fund for the creation of the latest title. So I think Jesus knows a little bit about this. Can you give us a quick rundown of how that happened with Bayonetta?
Basically, what happened with Bayonetta was that, you know, that when the first game came out, I mean, it sold pretty well. I mean, for the game that it was, I mean, it didn't sell tremendously, but it sold enough. It became sort of this cult classic among gamers now. It's a really fun game, but the problem was they wanted to make a sequel. They had a story, but no, they didn't have the funds to develop the game at all. So what? You know, there's always this big debate about whether Nintendo is only for kids and things like that, of that nature. So Nintendo wanted a game that was more mature, something that they knew a decent amount of people had interest in. So what they did is they went up to Platinum Games, said, we'll help you fund your game if you make this a Nintendo Wii U exclusive. And then Platinum Games desperately wanted this game to be made. So they agreed. Nintendo helped them out. They gave them money. They gave them some employees to help actually physically create the game and stuff. So the game was made. And a lot of people are still really upset about that because they want it on other consoles. But the Platinum Games developers keep having to... I see that post on Twitter a lot where they have to tell them that, you know, this game wouldn't have happened at all if Nintendo wouldn't have stepped in. So there's pretty much no possible way that it's ever going to be made on another console.
Yeah, I think Street Fighter kind of has a similar issue because Capcom has said that they weren't sure if Street Fighter V was going to come out without Sony, which I think kind of is a lie because 4 did pretty well. But I think what they meant was they weren't going to release 5 so soon because Ultra got released in like roughly a few months, right, Wilton?
Yeah.
A few months Street Fighter V got announced, and it's like, all right, I guess nobody's going to care about 4 anymore because 5 is already out. But, because they updated 4 so many times, they updated it with Super, they got Arcade Edition, then there was a free patch for Arcade Edition that a lot of people thought was going to be the last one, and then they released Ultra. But Street Fighter 4 came out, I think, in 2009? Maybe a little bit before that?
Yeah, roughly around there.
Yeah, so it got a long life cycle. So 2009 to 2016 is 7 years. So if it wasn't updated, that's a good amount of time to release a fighting game. But because it got updated so periodically, I think it seemed like it kind of came out of left field. It was a little too early. Ultra could have lasted, I think, maybe even 2 more years. But it's not. It's not anymore. All the pros have went and they have gone to Street Fighter V. And I think, Bayonetta being a Wii U exclusive gave them the ability to put her in Smash. And I think that continues with the whole Arbiter to KI logic. You get a character that isn't traditionally in a fighting game, but they are in a game on your console, and you put them in there. So if someone likes Bayonetta, now they can try Smash also. So I think that was the logic behind that. But, Bayonetta also got a re-release on Wii U, right?
Yeah, when you bought Bayonetta 2, if you bought the disc-based version, it automatically came with another disc of Bayonetta 1, and if you bought the digital version of Bayonetta 2, then you could still separately buy the digital version of Bayonetta 1 for the Wii U.
And Bayonetta didn't do so hot on Sony on PlayStation 3, if I remember correctly, because there were, glaring bugs.
Yeah, that is correct.
Yeah, and that kind of gives a big issue for Platinum Games, and one of the console versions is not as good as the other one, so they kind of have an issue of creating this game for both audiences. It's going to be problematic because if the PlayStation 4 version is bad, the market is in such a way that PlayStation 4 is the highest grossing console of this console cycle, so if it doesn't work on PS4, that takes a huge hit. So I can completely understand why, if Nintendo comes to them and says, "Hey, make it for our console," that they would take the money because that's guaranteed money. So, with Bayonetta on Wii U and in Smash 4, that kind of is another big thing because Smash has risen to fighting game levels, right? Wilton, it's considered a fighting game now.
Most definitely. I mean, it competes like a fighting game, has a community like a fighting game, and everything about it is a fighting game. You even have Ryu now, so it's undisputable.
Also, I believe 4 has you can map your buttons out now.
I did not hear about that, but I could believe that actually.
For Smash 4, you could.
Yeah, for Smash 4, yeah. And,
Yeah.
It's at EVO. It's got its huge tournaments that exist only as tournaments for them. It's a big esports title because, Capcom has Capcom Cup. KI had their own cup. I believe Mortal Kombat also had a big tournament. Jesus, can you confirm or deny that?
Yes, they did, and they're still trying to work their way to get another one going right now.
Right, but we have these big things. But Speaking of Mortal Kombat, actually, I want to touch a little bit on that. Mortal Kombat also has a ton of guest characters, but they're more horror related. So that kind of opens up a whole new market. So, like, Jesus, you're a big horror fan. Were you excited when you got more horror monsters in your fighting game?
Yes, I mean Mortal Kombat's my favorite fighting game. Horror movies, horror books, and everything. Horror in general is just my favorite genre, and I think most of these slasher characters are a perfect fit for Mortal Kombat because Mortal Kombat since day one has been gore, blood, and pretty much that's exactly what all these slasher characters are. If you watch any Friday the 13th movie, there's a lot of gore, people getting cut up and stuff. Same with Nightmare on Elm Street when they brought in Freddy Krueger. Now that they're bringing Leatherface, it's the same thing. Those movies are filled with gore. I mean, it's a little weird because seeing them in a fighting game, but once you get over that aspect of it, they're a perfect fit for that specific game. I don't think they would work in any other fighting game, but for Mortal Kombat, with the way that the game is made, I think that horror genre slasher film characters are all perfect fits for Mortal Kombat.
I'm actually interested in what you just said about, it's a perfect fit because looking at the Arbiter, he kind of makes sense how he fights in his trailer. Jacob, have you seen the trailer?
Actually, I have not.
Okay, so...
Oh, I don't remember it.
Okay, so he does, he has his guns. So he has guns, but he has his blade kind of as his primary weapon of choice. He also does throw the sticky grenade, so that's in there too. But how do you feel about there's a first-person shooter character now in a fighting game? Do you think that was a good fit?
Yes and no. It will the thing a first person shooter join from FPS to a fighting game. But at the same time, it's not the first time Microsoft had experimented with this. They done this on the Xbox City, similar to on Dead Life 4. They did introduce a new Spartan, aka Nicole, but as a fighter. So you basically see someone in a Spartan armor fighting in the fighting game. So ideally, the way you describe it, so they did a better job, in my opinion, with Delbero and Kill Instinct. So I didn't think the Spartan character did fit well in the Dead Life universe, in my opinion.
I mean, it isn't that out of the ordinary for people to put characters in from their other franchises that aren't fighting games into fighting games. So, like for Marvel vs. Capcom, we got the Resident Evil characters. We have, the Devil May Cry characters, which is, a beat 'em up, but, it's not a fighting game. And Street Fighter 5, will not have guest characters, but the Street Fighter universe has crossed over with other games. Like in Asura's Wrath, there was a Street Fighter 4 crossover. Ryu was in the DLC. Evil Ryu, Akuma, Oni, they were all in it. And that wasn't a fighting game. It was a beat 'em up. And Street Fighter 1 wasn't really a fighting game. It was also a beat 'em up. And a lot of the characters that make their way into a Street Fighters are from beat 'em up. So like Cody, Guy, Haggard. But I think so for KI to have a pretty good grasp of how to put a first-person shooter character into a fighting game, I think is a big deal because Battletoads was kind of a mesh of things, right? It was a side scroller and it had other things. Wilton, I didn't play a lot of Battletoads. Can you?
It was a beat 'em up. It kind of reminded me of like Final Fight, right? The kind of stuff. You walked around, you beat up people, you had like barrels, you could toss at people. It's pretty standard stuff like that.
Right, and it's pretty difficult to put a beat 'em up character in a fighting game because you have to kind of judge what transfers over. So like Cody has a knife in Street Fighter, Hager has a pipe in Marvel, but Rash has his bike and he has the ability to transform too in KI, but he doesn't have like a lot of really crazy off the charts stuff. And I think that balance kind of has to be made before you can really say, okay, this character is ready to be played. Because Mortal Kombat had a huge issue with balance in 10 specifically, because all the new DLC characters kept releasing. Actually, Jesus, how did you feel about the DLC characters that kept coming out?
It got honestly really. I liked the characters that they chose, but how they played, it was really, really upsetting because when Tanya first came out, Tanya was unstoppable. I mean, it got to the point I was playing the game every single day, and I mean, I thought I was pretty good, and then one of my little cousins who just had never played the game before picked up Tanya and then was keeping up with me the entire time because of how good Tanya was, and it was ridiculous. And right now with Tremor, it's sort of a similar issue. Tremor is a lot harder to use than Tanya, but Tremor has some unblockables, and if someone who's actually good at the game plays as Tremor, it's very, very difficult to beat them. So like Jason and Predator and stuff, some of the more gimmicky characters, I mean, they're still very good in comparison to some of the other characters, but that's a lot easier to get around those ones. But like the actual Mortal Kombat characters that were DLC are, like I said, they're pretty broken. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, definitely. And one interesting thing I think that kind of plays into this whole discussion is that Microsoft didn't have a guest character in Mortal Kombat 9, right? Yeah, the answer is no, they didn't. They didn't. Actually, I believe Kratos was the only guest character exclusive for PS3, right?
Yeah, it was Kratos.
But Freddy was on both, right?
Yep, Freddy was on both.
But I remember that was kind of a big deal because if you want to play Mortal Kombat, you want all the characters. You don't want to be playing on 360 and then you go to somebody's house and it's like, let's play on PS3, and you have absolutely no experience fighting this character because he's not on your game, And Wilton, we play fighting games a lot. That's a big deal, right?
It's a huge deal. If you don't have a chance to practice matchup, it's not even worth getting that console in that case.
Yeah, because remember when Tekken got announced and people complained about, I think, was her name Lucky Chloe?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and she got taken out of the game, but it's like, if she's really good and she's out of the game in some markets, but she's in the game in other markets, we're kind of screwed if we have to face, Japan. If Japan has it and America doesn't have it, that basically means Japan has a completely unfair advantage.
Yeah.
Kind of similar to how DeCapre was supposed to be a big deal in Ultra, because DeCapre was, I think, console exclusive. She wasn't in the arcades yet.
Oh, yeah.
But as a competitive player, that makes a huge difference. But I imagine to the casual people, that's not that huge of a deal because, the worst thing that happens is there's that one guy that that plays that character and he just destroys you because there's nothing you can do about it, right? And, I mean, I think Microsoft has learned their lesson is a big theme about how these things are going forward, because no guest character, even though they were offered guest characters. I believe Marcus Phoenix was the rumored for Mortal Kombat, and he makes sense. He's a very violent guy. The fatalities and brutalities basically write themselves. But they didn't pull the trigger on that. And honestly, I don't know why. But Microsoft is learning their lesson with KI. The issue is Sony does have a realistic monopoly on fighting games. We already talked about Street Fighter V, Guilty Gear, Guilty Gear was available on 360 and PS3. It was re-released, but the latest game is only on PlayStation consoles.
It was recently released to PC.
Okay, but it's also on PC. But if you wanted it on a console, I'm a console guy because I don't want a gaming PC because that'll distract me from doing my work.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's a pretty fair, reason. But Guilty Gear being only on one console, kind of, this is kind of a big thing for me. Was I got strong armed into basically having to buy a PlayStation 4. All my friends went there, which is, that's a problem in and of itself. But if I could get both games on either console, I was kind of leaning towards Xbox because I would like to keep my gamer tag. But, that's neither here nor there. But with all these games coming out on PlayStation 4, that basically means as a fighting game player, I have to get PlayStation 4 because some of these aren't going to come out on PC.
Yeah.
But the best fighting game on both consoles.
Nobody cares about
Yes.
Dead or Alive.
Lord.
Oh God.
I mean, you know what? If we had the sign, Yelling Will Ensue. But no, I'm gonna control myself. I'm not gonna yell at Jacob.
Not yet.
Yeah.
What?
Well,
I enjoy playing it.
You
Yeah,
enjoy
whatever.
playing it or enjoy watching it?
I enjoy actually playing it as a fighting game, Jesus.
Okay.
That's so
I
wrong.
believe you.
See, I actually did play Dead or Alive because I did like 3D fighters, but it became kind of an issue because it grew.
They
into
do a
something.
lot of guests.
They do have guests, like they have
Fighters.
like what, Ryu from.
No, they have a 3 of the 4 main character from Virtua Fighter.
But Virtua Fighter is also a 3D fighter, so it's not that difficult to port between the two.
Oh, yeah. True, but I haven't seen that happen often with them.
Well, I mean, King of Fighters is made up of what, like a big cosmopolitan of SNK's games, right, Wilton?
Yeah. They come from a lot of the different side titles and just drop in just to say hello.
Like what are the ones? It's
You
something.
got some of the
Wolves.
characters from Mark of the Wolves, Garo, Mark of the Wolves. You got some characters coming in from one of their intermediate series before they went down. There's B. Jeanette and the wrestler guy. Can't remember his name.
I think it's also Art of Fighting is one of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of characters from Art of Fighting. That's where Rio, Mr. Karate came from, Takuma, Yuri, all those characters, and Robert as well. So they dropped into the King of Fighter universe from the Art of Fighting series.
Right, and it's a lot easier for like SNK versus Capcom to have all of them because it's not Street Fighter versus KOF. It's Capcom versus SNK.
Yeah.
So, we talk a lot of guest characters, and guest characters can kind of be a pain to deal with, right? There is the infamous Link must win edict. For those who do not remember, Soul Calibur 2 had 3 different versions. It was on Xbox, GameCube, and PS2. PS2 had Heihachi, Xbox had Spawn, and GameCube got stuck with Link, who was borderline unstoppable at times. I mean, he was really strong. Soul Calibur 2 was not a balanced game. It had a lot of issues because you could equip weapons onto your characters, and that made the game really imbalanced because there was the Soul Edge, there was the Soul Calibur. Mitsurugi got a sword that if you blocked, it didn't matter. He could still hit you.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, so that was a real pain.
Those were the days.
Yeah, that was a different time. People complain about patches. Don't complain about patches.
Yeah. Oh, I remember the game that didn't each console had a unique character, correct?
Yes.
And I remember, I don't remember the one on that spot. So that was before I actually got one.
The Spawn.
Yeah, I don't even remember that. If you had your best weapon, you could one shot kill people.
It was a very imbalanced game at times. But, you know, it kind of sucks that Soul Calibur also fell off a cliff a little bit because Soul Calibur was really good about putting in guest characters. You know, in the third one, I don't think there was a guest character in the third one.
No, but in the fourth, they did their Star Wars characters.
Yes, they got Star Killer on both, and depending on which one you either had Yoda or Darth Vader, and they eventually released them.
Yeah, DLC.
Yeah, but Yoda was broken, and Darth Vader was actually the one balanced of the three. Because you couldn't grab Yoda because he's too short. Like that's cheating. But he could still grab you. That's what made that game really imbalanced.
It was awesome.
God, would we pet shop from JoJo's? No, we can't have that.
Yeah, I know, right?
It was awesome.
Hey, I play as Star Killer, though I have no shame to say it.
I mean, I think 5 was Assassin's Creed, and I was just like, I'm kind of done with this series.
Yeah, but I hope 5 was really bad compared to 4.
It was not very good.
Especially when half of the most of the characters were new, and all the returning ones were basically retired.
Well, what didn't make sense was there were characters who were young enough that theoretically they should still be able to fight. So like Talon and I forget the guy with the blade that was also young, but they were both teenagers in the third one and in the fourth one. So by the fifth one, they would have been young adults or like adults.
You talking about Max?
Who's Max?
Max, the one with the ninjas.
No, not him. No, I'm talking
So
about.
he was a teenager.
No, he wasn't. He was like in his 20s, I think. Maxie?
Is he? Are we really talking about age?
He wasn't young.
I know he was one of the younger ones.
Talon was probably the youngest
Talon
one.
was younger, but he was younger than a lot of the other ones.
No, see, because he rolled with what's his face, the guy with the pole. I forget his name, and the girl and the Chinese girl, and they were not exactly. They were young, but they weren't that young. You know, I'm talking like actual legitimate teenagers for Talon and the other guy, like 15 and 17, maybe 16.
But then one of the girls who fought with shield and sword was playable still. Not Sophia, not the older sister, the younger sister.
Yes, the younger sister was in it, and Sophia's two kids were in it. And Sophia was kind of in it too, actually.
Yeah, but she wasn't a fighter though, right?
I think she was a boss character.
Wow. I missed
missed
the whole game, didn't I?
That game was very bad. Like, listeners, if you like that game, I feel for you. I legitimately do. I love that series. That is one of my favorite 3D fighting games. But that game...
Let it out, man. It's okay.
It hurt me. It hurt me.
It was amazing, okay? Amazing, man.
That game was not amazing. Street Fighter Cross Tekken was a better game than that game.
Street Fighter in Marvel were fun.
Yeah, that game was broken. Actually, all those crossover games were broken. But that's a subject for another time. So, you know, we kind of got into the console wars with the fighting games, and I believe we'll eventually get back to this for the other things. You know, Jacob wanted to talk about other games we're getting brought into the fold. So, like, some studios have been, what's the word I'm looking for here? not selling themselves, but they've been kind of defecting a little bit. They've been making games for the opposing side, and that's a pretty big deal for the console wars, but has nothing to do with how the fighting game console wars are going. So I think this is a good time as any to stop, unless anybody else has something they want to say.
I wanted to bring up a point. Do you know if Tekken has announced a console of their choice?
I believe Tekken is supposed to go to PlayStation.
Okay, that sounds about right.
I got to check, but I believe Tekken, because Tekken is only in arcades right now, right?
Yeah.
And actually, I forgot, Pokken.
Oh, no. Street Fighter 4 lost its slot to that.
Yeah, so Pokken is the
What?
Pokken.
Best game ever.
Pokken
Please.
is a 3D fighter with Pokemon as
Oh, that one.
Pokken.
Oh, I know about that game.
Yeah, Pokken. I have no idea what is going on with Pokken. I heard you can Stone Cold Stunner
people
people.
love it.
You can with Pikachu.
You can Stone Cold Stunner people with Pikachu, which is.
So it'd be fun to play.
I mean, I guess.
Best
Oh,
game ever.
And just to let you know, Tekken will be on the PS4, but no release date for only for France on July 2016.
Yeah, I think they're still working things out because Akuma is in Tekken, which is really weird because Akuma is not in Street Fighter.
You know, that's an interesting point. Tekken might have done the most interesting character crossover I've seen. He's not just like a transplant, but he's going to be playing an integral part in the story of the game.
Yeah, he's supposed to kill Heihachi's wife.
I think he was contracted by Heihachi's wife to kill Kazuya or something like that.
Oh,
Yeah, that's interesting.
yeah, that's a pretty big deal because he's a guest character with a huge thing, and it also kind of sets the stage for Tekken Cross SF, which is supposed to come out.
Supposed to, yeah.
Yeah. It's supposed to come out last console cycle. Is still not even out yet. The last guardian of fighting games.
Yeah, I mean, I'll wait as long as it doesn't end up like a fiasco like Street Fighter Cross Tekken.
Yeah, that game. The gems were the worst part. I think if we didn't have gems, I think it would have been fine.
Yeah.
Made it completely imbalanced. But yeah, Pokken. Let's talk about Pokken before we close off. Pokken is
Oh, I have something about it.
okay.
Pokken look interesting because there actually been some fan-made fighting games, and they actually are loved by the Pokemon community. So for Pokemon and Nintendo themselves actually getting to that official one, it making people go crazy. Probably you guys have probably seen that a bit yourself. And a lot of the high speed, I believe it'll be one of the net fighting games. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
I mean, I think the biggest problem for it is that the community has to drive it. So, like, I love Skullgirls with all my heart. I loved it. But the big name players in Skullgirls didn't necessarily transfer into other games. So they kind of just stayed in their community. And then there weren't enough people from other games coming into Skullgirls. So the community kind of just fell off. And that was actually one of the biggest titles because it started as an arcade title, not an arcade as in arcades, but as a downloadable game. So Xbox Live Arcade and PSN had it, and eventually it kind of just stuck with PlayStation. That's another game that kind of stuck with PlayStation, and that was part of the larger console wars with the indie developers. But that game got a huge crowdfunding because a lot of people were interested in it. They wanted to, put their money into it, but I don't know if a lot of people were interested in playing it because it seemed like the lore was what really got people interested, not necessarily the fighting game itself. And it got a lot of money. It got so much money that it funded development for characters, but they just fell off. It got, I think, 5 extra characters. Even a free character that wasn't supposed to come out, but it just didn't. It didn't go anywhere. It was the little fighting game that could, but it couldn't stay relevant. So I fear Pokken has a similar fate to it, because if people are interested in Pokemon, are they going to play enough of it to keep it sustainable? I don't know what you guys think about that. Jesus, what do you think about that?
I think that is going to be a very serious issue with the game because, I mean, I'm not sure. The only big fighting game right now on the Wii U is Smash. So aside from, I don't know if all the Smash players are going to want to go play that because it's going to play completely differently than that. It's a completely different style of fighting game. So I don't think too many of the Smash players will stick with that. And the big issue is going to be, are there enough people from other consoles that are willing to go out and buy a Wii U to go and actually play that game?
Okay, Jacob, how do you feel about the whole Pokken hype train?
No, the whole hype train, people don't love it. At first, I think don't hit all big people who love Pokemon. More like end up buying it, but the same problem, the issue you mentioned was, will you be able to keep going once the hype dies down? Which now we have no idea. I've seen video it being posted in almost every group I'm in, dealing with games, anime, and then just talking about random stuff in general. So the whole idea of it will be interesting. Do I think it will survive long enough for to be a big have a own tournaments on Evo or all the other one you already mentioned? Probably not. The way it plays, a completely different type of fighting game compared to a lot of the other types.
Actually, it will be at Evo this year.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yes.
my bad.
It actually is one of the main games at Evo this year.
I apologize for my incorrectness right there. I did not know that.
The thing is, the Evo games, like the big ones, get voted on, so Pokken beat out Ultra Street Fighter 4.
Wow.
God.
Yeah, it was.
Wow.
So I'm assuming you guys aren't happy about that.
Well, oh God. So how do I
Okay.
put this?
Okay, let me go first.
Go ahead.
I think because most people said in the Street Fighter community said they're not gonna keep playing Street Fighter 4, it's okay. Okay, go ahead.
I think the problem is I have barely seen any gameplay footage of this, and I don't know how many people have gotten their hands on the game, right? Which is a
Right.
big thing. We don't know how this game plays. I mean, it's produced by Namco, who produced Tekken.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
So
that's why it's
that-
Pokken.
Yeah. So that brings another interesting point. Tekken is one of the hardest fighting games I think anyone will ever play. And I don't know how well they're going to try to tune it down so that, the entry barrier is as high as Tekken. At the same time, if Tekken players are interested in playing but it gets dumbed down, there's going to be disappointment on that end. But if it isn't tuned down, there's going to be frustration on the entry players, casuals or people starting out the game. So it's going to be hard for them to try to figure out where they put this game. Right? It has an evil spot, but we're going to see how that goes.
I think the hardest part is I've looked at it and I believe there's assist characters in there,
Oh, really?
Yes.
which
Yes, there are.
brings a whole nother thing because Tekken doesn't have assist characters.
Yeah, the different type of Pokemon you get to choose. I think they let you choose our 2 types for each fight or round.
That sounds like
And they're not small Pokemon either. Like one of them could be a Lapras.
it sounds like it's gonna be a huge we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I mean, I do have hope for it to survive because I don't want to see things die, but
How kind of you.
we'll see. We will see what happens with Pokemon. I think some people in the fighting game community kind of feel not so high on it, but I feel like the people in the Pokemon community are excited. So I think that's really what matters more than anything else. So on that note, I think we're going to wrap this up. And I just want to thank everyone for tuning in, listening to us, putting up with us, being our fans. Thank you all so much. This was one of the first times we did not meet together. Hopefully, that won't throw people off. You don't get to see our lovely faces. Lovely in quotes, but I want to thank our panel. I want to thank Jesus.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you guys for listening, not watching this time, but thank you.
I want to thank Jacob.
Thanks for giving your time listening to today's episode.
And of course, we want to thank our special guest, our fighting game esports expert, Wilton.
Thanks for listening, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully we can get you back on a few more episodes. Any video game thing, I think we would love to have you on.
Thank you. I would love
Yes.
to be on.
Yes, thank you. Oh, there's a lot of love going on here. On a podcast we call Yelling Will Ensue, so. But thanks again. We love you all. Thank you for listening to us, and we will catch you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.